Paper Crafters Library. In this video I'm going to show you how to create this Make-A-Wish card which features a paper piecing technique. Now, paper piecing is a fantastic technique when you're working with outline stamps and you either don't feel comfortable with coloring outline images or you just want to create a card, nice, quick and easy card without having to take the time to color the image. So in order to paper piece this ice cream cone, I'm going to be stamping it 3 separate times on 3 separate types of paper. So first off, for the actual cone part of this, I'm going to be stamping it onto a piece of coffee cardstock from American Crafts. I'm inking up my stamp in Ranger's Archival Coffee ink, and the stamp set that I'm using is Paper Smooch's Little Lady stamp, and it's this ice cream cone with a cherry on top image here, which I guess actually could probably also serve as a cupcake. It kind of looks like it could be that as well. So I'm inking up my stamp in my Coffee Archival ink, and then I'm stamping it onto a piece of cardstock. Now you don't actually have to stamp the whole image if you don't want to. You could only just stamp the cone part since that's all we're going to be using. So here you can see I have now stamped the cone. Now for the ice cream part, I'm going to be using this angled pattern paper strip, which comes from a 6x6 Echo Park paper pad called Sweet Day. So I'm going to ink up my stamp once again. And then I'm going to stamp it onto my pattern paper. And as you can see, I only stamped the actual ice cream part. I didn't bother stamping the cone since I have the cone being cut out of a completely different pattern of paper. Now for the cherry, you could use a patterned paper if you want. I don't actually have in this collection a pattern or a color of paper that's the red that has a pattern, so I'm just going to use this solid pattern here that comes from that same Sweet Day collection, and then I'm just stamping the cherry like so, and I actually think I sponged that a little bit, so I'm just going to stamp it again. And there you can see what that looks like. So for each of these pieces I now need to go ahead and cut them out using my scissors. So when I'm cutting them, actually, maybe I'll cut the ice cream first because it's more of a contrast, so it's easier to see what I'm doing. You can cut just along the outer edge. So I'm not actually cutting on the outer border line because I want to be able to see that solid line, and if you cut on that, then you're not going to see as much of that. But I'm cutting as close to it as I can possibly get. I don't want to have any of the pink showing. As you can see, I'm using the inside of my blade to cut. Now I'm not cutting the entire cherry. As you can see, I'm cutting through the cherry. And I'm just rotating my stamped piece as I'm cutting. And we do have a video in Paper Crafters Library that gives you some tips on how to cut out stamped images with the most accuracy possible. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish cutting this ice cream piece out, the cone, and my cherry, and then I'll be back. So you can see here all my pieces are cut out. The next thing I want to do is add a little bit of dimension using some sponging. So I'm taking here my Tim Holtz brushed corduroy distress ink and a sponge dauber. I'm pouncing my sponge dauber on the ink pad to pick up ink. You can see that there. I've chosen a lighter color of ink because I don't want it to show up too dark on there, just enough to give it a little bit of depth. So I'm starting off the cardstock and just sponging in the bottom left, so the bottom and then the left corner, the left hand side. So just like that, where you can see it's a little bit darker. Then I'm going to take another sponge dauber with some Tattered Rose distress ink, and I'm going to sponge here just along the bottom and a little bit along the left side like so. And then finally I'm going to take a little bit of Barn Door Distress ink and very carefully just sponge along the bottom of the cherry, the bottom left corner, like so. So there you can see what those pieces now look like. So the next thing I'm going to do is just assemble the pieces. So here I've got some Tombow Mono multi-liquid glue. I'm spreading it in the center of my ice cream, and I'm going to just stick it to my cone. Now you'll notice that on the cone I didn't cut out just the cone, I left some of the ice cream on top, and that was so that I'd have a place to stick my patterned paper ice cream piece, like so. And then once again I'm going to use a little bit of Tombow. Just going to put a little drip at the top, just a tiny little dot of it, grab my cherry, and then place my cherry on top like so. And then I'm just going to give this a moment to set, and I'm going to add a little highlight to the top right, and for that I'm going to be using my Sharpie poster paint pen. The only one I have right now is a medium point, but this does come in extra fine and fine as well. Now you do want to make sure that you shake it very well before you use it. I've already pre-shaken it, but that's just to give you an idea. And then I'm just going to put kind of like an apostrophe or a quotation mark there in the top right of the cherry, and then that just gives it a little bit of a highlight. So now I'm going to set that aside to dry. With my ice cream now assembled, I'm ready to start working on the rest of my card. I have here a card base that I created out of Bazzill cardstock Painted Desert. I took a 4 1/4 by 11 inch piece of cardstock, scored it at 5 1/2 inches, and then folded it in half to create a standard 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card. Here I have a piece of patterned paper that comes from that same Echo Park collection I used for the ice cream, the 6x6 paper pad Sweet Day, and I took the polka dot pattern and I cut a piece that's 4 by 5 1/4. So I'm now going to take some double-sided adhesive, put it onto my patterned paper, and then I'm going to center and stick it onto my card so that I'm leaving an even border on all 4 sides. So there you can see what that looks like. So now what I want to do is I'm going to take this piece of pattern paper, which also comes from that same Sweet Day collection, and I want to die cut a flag using the MFT Dynamics, and the actual die set is called Fishtail Flags Stacks. So I'm going to use, it has a whole bunch of different sizes as you can see here, and I'm going to use the largest size. So I'm going to just stick it onto a piece of my pattern paper, and the tape that I'm using to hold it down is my Scotch Matte Finish removable tape, and that's simply just to keep it from shifting. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to die cut it in my Sizzix Big Shot. So here you can see what my die cut piece looks like. Now I don't need a piece this big, I'm actually going to be trimming it a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to set aside my dies because I don't need that anymore. And I want to determine, first of all, the position of where my ice cream is going to be. So I'm going to want my ice cream to be aligned close to the bottom, and then I'm going to be stamping my sentiment. Now my sentiment comes from the Paper Smooches stamp set. It's called Chit Chat. You can see here it's a set that has all sentiments on it, and this one just says Make a Wish. So I'm going to be mounting it to my acrylic block. I'm going to ink it in the same ink I used to stamp the ice cream, which is the Ranger Archival Coffee ink. And then I'm going to stamp it just above where I want my ice cream cone to be. So now that I know the placement before I stamp it, I'm just going to move my ice cream cone. So there you can see what that now looks like. So I'm just going to set my ink aside. So now what I want to do is determine the placement on my card, because I want to wrap some twine around the top of it here. So I want to make sure I leave enough room for that, which means that I'm probably going to have the top of my sentiment hanging about an inch below the card. Now, just to keep it in place while I trim it, I'm going to take some Dotto adhesive, which is a temporary removable adhesive, and that's just going to keep my cardstock piece in place while I trim it. So I'm going to flip this over, use the edge of my card as a guide, and then just take my scissors and cut along that line. Now, if you have a paper trimmer, you could also use a paper trimmer for this. There you can see what that looks like so far. So I'm now going to remove this from my pattern paper piece and take some twine. Here I'm using Stampin' Up's Early Espresso Baker's Twine. I'm going to take a little piece of tape and I'm going to tape one end of the twine to the back of my pattern paper piece, and then I'm going to wrap it around 3 times and leave a tail that's about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And then I'm going to take a little bit of tape again to tape down that end. So there you can see what that looks like. So now I'm ready to mount this to my card. And for that, I'm going to use these 3D dots from EK Success, and it's dimensional foam that's 1/16 of an inch thick. So I'm going to put these squares, now these ones are 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch squares, on the back of my flag piece. As you can see, I'm removing the backing, and now I'm going to align it with the top edge of my patterned paper. Now, when cutting it, I aligned it with the top edge of my card, but for actually placing it, I'm aligning it with the top edge of my patterned paper. And then just making sure it's straight. So there you can see what that looks like. So now I can take my ice cream and I can place a couple of pieces of this dimensional foam, these 3D dots, on the back of my ice cream, and I can go ahead and stick my ice cream down like so. Now the last thing that I want to do is just to add this brown button at the top. So I'm going to take a little bit more twine, probably about an 8 to 10 inch piece. I'm going to thread one end down through one buttonhole, thread it underneath the twine that I tied around here earlier, and then I'm going to bring that end up through this second hole of my button. And then just making sure my ends are even, I'm going to go ahead and tie this in a bow. And then it's simply a matter of adjusting the size of your bow. And when tying your bow, you do want to try as much as possible to keep your twine from twisting, because then it makes your bow look kind of wonky. And as you can see, that's sort of what's happening here on this side. And then just going to trim the ends. So there you can see what that looks like. And then as a last step, just to secure the button, you could take some, these are mini glue dots. I'm just going to pick one off of there and stick it underneath my button. And then that's just going to hold my button in place and keep it from flopping around on my card. So there you can see what that looks like. If you enjoyed this video, you enjoy the way we teach, and would like to learn even more, we invite you to check out the Paper Crafters Library. Whether you are a beginner looking to learn the basics or an advanced paper crafter looking to learn new skills and techniques, you'll find it all here. Stamping, card making, scrapbooking, altered art, we cover it all. With over 1,600 videos currently in our library and new videos added each month, we are the largest and most comprehensive online library of video tutorials for paper crafters on the internet. We invite you to visit our library and see what we're all about.